I found the notebook in the kitchen drawer next to the loose batteries. I don't remember putting it there. It has my handwriting inside, but not my memory. The drawer had been sticking for weeks. I'd been meaning to fix it, but Tuesday afternoon I needed scissors. The wood groaned when I pulled it open. Behind the batteries and old takeout menus, tucked against the back corner, sat a spiral notebook. The kind I always buy from the drugstore. Blue cover, college-ruled, 80 sheets. My name was written on the front in black ink. The letters slanted exactly like mine do when I'm tired. But I hadn't bought a new notebook in months. I opened it to the first page. The date at the top was Monday, yesterday. The entry described my morning routine in perfect detail. How I'd made coffee with too much cream. How I'd burned my tongue on the first sip. How I'd stood at the window watching the neighbor's cat hunt something in the leaves. Every word was true. Every word was mine. But I hadn't written any of it. My handwriting has this particular way of crossing the letter T, a quick slash that barely touches the stem. Nobody else writes it quite the same way. The notebook was full of these tiny marks, page after page of my own hand documenting days I remembered living, but not documenting, something else. I flipped through slowly. Tuesday's entry was there too, though Tuesday hadn't ended yet. It described what I'd eaten for lunch, a turkey sandwich with mustard. I hadn't eaten lunch yet. I'd been planning to skip it entirely. The description was so detailed I could taste the bread, slightly stale, the mustard sharp against my tongue. But my stomach was empty. My mouth hadn't tasted anything since morning coffee. I kept reading. Wednesday's entry talked about a phone call from my mother. She was supposed to call Wednesday evening. She always called on Wednesdays. The entry quoted our conversation word for word. Things we hadn't said yet, things we might never say, but they sounded exactly like us. My mother's voice came through in the quoted dialogue, her way of pausing before asking if I was eating enough, her habit of changing subjects when conversations got too close to real feelings. The notebook had captured her perfectly, like it had been listening. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no scheduled reminders. My mother hadn't called in 3 days. The entries kept going. A week ahead, 2 weeks. The handwriting never changed. Always mine. Always describing moments that felt familiar but hadn't happened. Like dreams I'd forgotten upon waking. Thursday's entry mentioned a stranger on the bus. A woman with silver earrings who would smile at me. She'd be reading a paperback with a torn cover. We wouldn't speak, but I'd think about her for the rest of the day. The entry described the exact shade of her lipstick, coral pink with a slight shimmer. I don't ride the bus on Thursdays. I walk to work. I've walked the same route every day for 2 years. But something made me want to catch the morning bus, just to see. Friday's entry was longer. It described a conversation with my co-worker Sarah about her divorce. She was going to tell me things she hadn't told anyone else, about finding text messages, about sleeping in the guest room for months, about the way her husband had stopped looking at her during dinner. Sarah wasn't divorced. She'd been married for 6 years, happy, as far as I knew. We'd talked about her anniversary party just last week. The notebook knew things it shouldn't know, but worse than that, it knew them in my voice. Not just the words, but the way I think about words. The patterns my thoughts follow when I'm trying to understand something complicated. Saturday's entry described a dream I would have about walking through my childhood home, but all the rooms were in the wrong places. The kitchen where the living room should be, the bathroom connected to the garage. In the dream, this wouldn't feel strange. It would feel like coming home. I'd had that dream before, years ago, but I'd never written it down anywhere. The notebook somehow knew the exact feeling of that dream, the way the light fell through windows that shouldn't exist, the sound of my mother calling from a room I couldn't find, even the smell of something baking that never finished cooking. Sunday's entry was the shortest, just 2 lines. She's starting to notice. This will get harder now. My hands shook as I read those words, written in my handwriting. But I'd never written about myself in third person. I'd never referred to myself as she see in my own journal. I flipped to the back of the notebook. The last few pages were blank, but not empty. Indentations pressed into the paper from writing that hadn't happened yet, like someone had written on a page that was later removed. The ghost of words I couldn't read. I closed the notebook and put it back in the drawer, but my hand lingered on the cover. Part of me wanted to keep reading, to see what else I was going to do, what else I was going to think. The rest of me wanted to throw it away. I made lunch instead, a turkey sandwich with mustard. The bread was slightly stale, just like the notebook had described, the mustard sharp against my tongue. I hadn't planned to make a sandwich. I'd been thinking about soup, but my hands moved without asking permission, opening the bread bag, finding the mustard in the refrigerator door, spreading it exactly the way the notebook said I would. I ate standing at the counter, looking out the window. The neighbor's cat was still hunting in the leaves, still chasing something I couldn't see. I decided to test it. Wednesday morning, I opened the notebook to a blank page and wrote a single sentence. I had pizza for breakfast. A harmless lie. I'd eaten oatmeal with frozen berries, the same breakfast I'd had for 3 months straight. Thursday morning, the entry had changed, not crossed out, not erased, overwritten, like the original words had never existed. I had oatmeal with frozen berries. I thought about pizza, but didn't want the sugar crash. The handwriting was still mine, but I hadn't written those words. I tried again Friday, wrote that I'd called in sick to work. I hadn't. I'd gone to my job at the insurance office and filed claims for 6 hours straight, same as always. Saturday's page corrected me again, described my actual day in uncomfortable detail, how I'd hesitated before answering the phone when my supervisor called, how I'd blink twice during our conversation, the way I do when I'm concentrating, how I'd shifted my weight from my left foot to my right while standing at the copy machine. Nobody notices when I blink twice. It's not something people pay attention to, but the notebook had counted. It knew about the moment I'd paused outside the elevator on the 3rd floor. Just for a second, while I tried to remember if I'd locked my apartment that morning. A pause so brief I'd barely noticed it myself. The notebook described my thoughts during that pause, word for word, like it had been inside my head, listening to the conversation I have with myself when nobody else is around. Monday's entry mentioned things I hadn't told anyone, how I'd found a gray hair and pulled it out immediately, how I'd checked my email 4 times in 10 minutes, hoping for something I couldn't name, how I'd stood in front of the bathroom mirror for longer than necessary, wondering if I looked older than I had the week before. Private moments, the kind that happen in the spaces between the parts of life other people see. Tuesday, it wrote about the woman on the bus. She was there, exactly as the notebook had described. Silver earrings catching the morning light, paperback with a torn cover, something about a detective in a small town. She did smile at me, a quick polite smile when our eyes met across the aisle. Her lipstick was coral pink with a slight shimmer. I'd never seen her before Tuesday, but according to the notebook, I'd been thinking about her since Thursday, wondering about her story, creating small fictions about where she was going, what she was reading, why she always sat in the third row from the front. Except I hadn't been wondering about any of those things. I don't usually notice other passengers. I spend bus rides looking out the window or checking my phone. But Tuesday morning, I found myself watching her, following the notebook's script without meaning to, creating the thoughts it had already written down. Wednesday, the notebook knew about my conversation with Sarah before it happened. She pulled me aside after the morning meeting, looked around to make sure nobody was listening, and told me about the text messages, about sleeping in the guest room, about dinner conversations that felt like negotiations between strangers. She used almost the exact words the notebook had predicted. Even the pauses fell in the same places, but the notebook had also captured something else. The way I'd shifted in my chair when she mentioned her husband's late nights, how I'd glanced at the clock on my computer screen twice during her story, how I'd thought about my own empty apartment and felt relieved, then guilty about feeling relieved. Nobody could have predicted those micro reactions, not even Sarah, who was watching my face while she talked. The notebook was reading my body language in real time, translating thoughts I hadn't formed into words I hadn't spoken. Thursday's entry described my evening routine with precision that felt invasive. How I'd check the locks twice before bed. How I'd scroll through my phone for exactly 12 minutes, looking at nothing in particular. How I'd lie awake thinking about conversations from years ago, replaying them with different endings. It knew about the dream I'd have before I had it. About walking through rooms that belonged to someone else's house but felt like home. About calling for my mother and hearing my own voice answer from the next room. I woke up Friday morning with the taste of that dream still in my mouth, metallic and sweet, like old coins. The notebook was waiting on my bedside table. I didn't remember bringing it upstairs, but there it was, open to Friday's page. The entry described how I'd reach for it before fully waking, how my hand would move automatically, like muscle memory, for something I'd never done before. That's exactly what had happened. Friday afternoon, I tried writing in red ink instead of black. A simple sentence about the weather. It's raining. It wasn't raining. The sun was shining through my office window, making patterns on the carpet. Saturday, the entry was still there, but now it was in black ink. My handwriting, but not my pen. It's sunny. I thought about rain, but didn't want to close the blinds. The notebook had changed more than my words. It had changed the color I'd written them in, like it was editing my memories at the source. Sunday, I stopped trying to test it, started reading instead. Let it tell me what I was going to do, then did those things because they felt familiar, because fighting the predictions was more exhausting than following them. Monday's entry described this decision, how I'd stop resisting and start cooperating, how I'd recognize the feeling of living inside someone else's story about my life, how I'd start to wonder if I'd ever been writing my own story at all. The coffee shop appeared in Tuesday's entry before I'd ever noticed it. 3 blocks from my apartment, between the dry cleaner and the pharmacy. The notebook described how I'd walk past it every morning, but never go inside. How I'd glance through the window and see someone behind the counter who looked familiar. Wednesday morning, I look through the window. A woman with dark hair tied back in a messy bun. She was wiping down the espresso machine with careful movements. Something about her posture reminded me of someone I couldn't place. She looked up and waved. Not the polite wave you give to strangers, the casual wave you give to people you see regularly. I'd never seen her before. Thursday, the notebook said I'd go inside, order a medium coffee with oat milk. The barista would spell my name correctly on the cup without asking. She'd say, "See you tomorrow," when I left. I don't drink coffee with oat milk. I take it black or with regular milk. But Thursday morning, I heard myself ordering exactly what the notebook had predicted. The words came out automatically, like I'd been saying them for months. The barista didn't ask for my name. She wrote it on the cup while I was still fishing for my wallet. Perfect spelling, perfectly legible, like she'd written it 100 times before. "See you tomorrow," she said when she handed me the coffee. She smiled like we shared some private joke I couldn't remember. The oat milk tasted better than I'd expected. Creamy without being heavy. I found myself looking forward to Friday's cup before I'd finished Thursday's. Friday, the notebook mentioned something new. A receipt tucked under the lid of my cup. A message written on the back in handwriting that looked almost like mine, but not quite. The letters slanted differently, more confident, less careful. The message was there exactly as predicted. You left something behind. I hadn't left anything behind. I'd been carrying the same purse for 2 years. Everything was where it always was. Keys, wallet, phone, lip balm, the notebook. Nothing missing. But the receipt felt important anyway. Like a clue to something I should understand, but didn't. Saturday's entry was longer. It described how I'd sit at the small table by the window and watch the barista work, how she'd glance over occasionally and nod like she was checking on something, how she'd start making my drink before I ordered it, how she'd slip a second note under my cup, this one in handwriting that matched mine exactly. "You're forgetting on purpose." The words made my stomach clench, though I couldn't say why. They felt true and impossible at the same time, like a diagnosis for something I didn't know I had. Monday, I brought the notebook with me to the coffee shop, left it open on the table while I drank my coffee. The barista looked over more often than usual. Her eyes lingered on the pages I was reading. When I got up to leave, she called after me. "Same time tomorrow?" I nodded without thinking, like we'd made this arrangement weeks ago. Tuesday, she handed me my coffee with both hands. Her fingers brushed mine for just a moment. Her skin was cold, like she'd been holding ice cubes. "You're writing again," she said. Not a question. A statement of fact. I guess I am. The words surprised me. I hadn't decided to admit anything. Good. It's important to keep records. She turned back to the espresso machine before I could ask what she meant. Wednesday's note was different, longer, written in my handwriting, but with words I'd never choose. Some things need to be documented. Some things need to be remembered exactly as they happened, even when you don't want to remember them, especially then. I read it 3 times before putting it in my pocket with the others. My collection of messages from myself that I hadn't written. Thursday, I asked the barista's name. She looked at me for a long time before answering. "You know my name," she said. "You wrote it down somewhere." I flipped through the notebook later, looking for her name. It wasn't there, but there were spaces where it should have been. Sentences that felt incomplete without a name to fill the gaps. Friday, she told me she'd been working the coffee shop for 3 years, since the week after it opened. She remembered my first visit, though I'd never been there before last week. "You ordered black coffee," she said. "Asked for extra sugar, but didn't use it. You sat at the corner table and wrote in a blue notebook, just like the one you're carrying now." She described things I couldn't remember doing. Conversations we'd supposedly had about books, about weather, about the regulars who came in every morning. She quoted things I'd apparently said, in my voice, but with a confidence I'd never possessed. "You always left before the afternoon crowd arrived," she said. "Always paid an exact change. Always said thank you twice. I don't say thank you twice. I'm barely polite enough to say it once." Saturday's note was the longest yet, a full paragraph in handwriting so similar to mine it could have been a forgery, if forgery was possible without an original. Memory is a choice. You can choose to remember things that never happened. You can choose to forget things that did. The notebook helps with both. It's easier to live someone else's version of your life when that version makes more sense than the original. The words felt heavy in my hands, like they weighed more than paper should, like they were trying to tell me something I wasn't ready to understand. Sunday, I didn't go to the coffee shop, walked past it twice but didn't go inside. The barista was visible through the window both times. She watched me walk by but didn't wave. Monday's notebook entry described Sunday's absence. How I'd wanted to go inside but couldn't make myself open the door. How I'd stood outside for several minutes, reading the menu posted in the window like I'd never seen it before. How the barista had watched me from behind the counter and understood exactly why I hadn't come in. The entry ended with a single line that made my hands shake. "She's waiting for you to remember who you used to be." Tuesday morning, I caught the first sign in the bathroom mirror. After my shower, while the glass was still fogged with steam, a single word had been traced in the condensation. Wait. I hadn't written it. My hands were busy with my towel, my hair, reaching for the clothes I'd laid out the night before. But the letters were there, finger-drawn in the fog, clear and deliberate. The handwriting looked like mine. Wednesday, the notebook warned me it would happen again. The mirror shows things a second before they happen. Blinks, gestures, words you haven't spoken yet. When you move, it delays just enough to prove it's no longer you. I tested it that evening, stood in front of the bathroom mirror and raised my right hand. My reflection raised its left hand a split second later, like it was copying me instead of being me. I blinked. My reflection blinked back, but the timing was wrong. A tiny delay, barely noticeable, unless you were looking for it. Thursday. I started avoiding mirrors deliberately, kept my eyes down when I brushed my teeth, looked at my feet instead of my face when I washed my hands, but reflections caught me anyway, in windows, in the black screen of my phone, in the metal surface of the office elevator. All of them showed the same thing. Me, but not quite me, moving just slightly off rhythm, like a video with delayed audio. Friday the notebook described something I hadn't noticed yet, how the mirror would start showing larger gestures before I made them, how I'd see myself reach for something before I had decided to reach for it. Saturday morning, I watched it happen, saw my reflection pick up my coffee cup while my actual hand was still flat on the table. The movement looked natural, practiced, like I'd been reaching for that cup all along. A second later, my real hand followed, picked up the cup exactly as the reflection had shown me, like I was learning choreography from myself. Sunday, the delays got longer. My reflection would turn its head to look at something before I'd noticed there was anything to look at. Point at objects I hadn't seen yet. Mouth words I hadn't thought of saying. I started covering mirrors with towels, hung sheets over the bathroom mirror, the one in my bedroom, the decorative one in the hallway. But reflective surfaces were everywhere. The microwave door, the chrome faucet in the kitchen, the glass front of the oven, all of them showing me things I was about to do. Monday, I saw myself in the coffee shop window before I had decided to go there. My reflection was already walking toward the door while I was still standing on the corner, considering my options. The barista looked up when I entered, like she'd been expecting me at exactly that moment. "Your reflection got here first," she said, not joking, stating a fact. I looked at the window behind me. My reflection waved at the barista. I hadn't lifted my hand. Tuesday, the notebook started drawing instead of writing. Crude sketches of my apartment, but wrong in small ways. The lamp moved from the left side of the couch to the right, the bookshelf taller than it actually was. A shadow in the corner where nothing should cast a shadow. The drawings were unsigned. They looked like my work. The same uncertain lines I'd made in art class years ago. The same habit of pressing too hard with the pencil, leaving indentations in the paper below. Wednesday, I found the first new object. A coffee mug I'd never seen before, sitting on my kitchen counter. It was the exact shade of blue the notebook had drawn the day before. The handle curved differently than my usual mugs, more comfortable in my hand. I didn't remember buying it, but it felt familiar anyway, like something I'd owned for years and somehow forgotten. Thursday, there were 2 new objects: a book on my nightstand with pages already bookmarked, a small plant on the windowsill that hadn't been there the night before. Both items appeared in Wednesday's drawings, positioned exactly where I'd found them. The book was something I'd been meaning to read but never bought. The plant was the kind I'd considered getting, but decided required too much maintenance. Someone had furnished my apartment with my own intentions. Friday, I woke up to find the living room rearranged, not dramatically, just shifted by degrees. The coffee table moved 6 inches closer to the couch. The reading chair angled toward the window instead of the television. The rug rotated 90 degrees, revealing a pattern I'd never noticed. The new arrangement felt better, more natural. like this was how the room was supposed to look all along. Saturday, the notebook drew my bedroom with an extra piece of furniture, a small desk by the window, with a chair positioned at exactly the right height for writing. The drawing was so detailed I could see the wood grain, the slight scuff on one leg where it might bump against the wall. Sunday morning, the desk was there, solid oak, exactly as drawn. A notebook sat open on its surface, filled with handwriting that looked like mine but felt like someone else's thoughts. The first entry was dated 3 months ago. It described a version of my life that was similar to the real one, but improved in small ways. Better conversations with coworkers, more confident decisions. A general sense of purpose I'd never quite managed to achieve. The handwriting was definitely mine, but the voice was different, more assured, less apologetic. Like the person I might have been if I'd made slightly different choices along the way. Monday, I sat at the new desk and tried to write in the notebook. My pen hovered over the page for several minutes before I realized why I couldn't start. The next entry was already there, waiting for me to catch up to it. Written in my handwriting, describing the exact thoughts I was having about trying to write something. All I had to do was trace over the letters that were already there. The ink was so faint, it was almost invisible unless you looked directly at it. Like someone had written in pencil and then erased everything except the ghost impression pressed into the paper. Tuesday, I started tracing regularly, following the predetermined letters with my pen, making solid what had only been suggested. It felt like meditation, peaceful in a way that actual writing had never been. The words I was tracing described a life that was mostly mine, but cleaner somehow, more intentional. The version of myself in these entries made better decisions, said more interesting things, noticed details I always missed. She was me, but more so. Me with the volume turned up, the contrast adjusted, the focus pulled sharp. Wednesday, I realized I'd stopped looking in mirrors entirely, but I could feel my reflection watching me anyway, following my movements from behind glass surfaces, learning my habits, taking notes I couldn't see. The notebook's latest drawing showed 2 figures sitting at the desk, one holding a pen, one observing. Both had my face, but only one looked real. The other looked like she was waiting for something. The changes started small enough that I questioned my own memory. Thursday morning, the living room lamp was unplugged, though I distinctly remembered reading by its light the night before. The cord coiled neatly beside the outlet, like someone had been careful not to damage anything while removing it. I plugged it back in and tested the switch. It worked perfectly. No reason for it to have been disconnected. Friday, I woke to find my books rearranged, not alphabetically or by size, but by some system I couldn't identify. Books I'd loved moved to eye level. Books I'd struggled to finish pushed to higher shelves. Like someone had been reading over my shoulder for months, taking notes on my preferences. The notebook had sketched this new arrangement 2 days earlier. Every spine drawn in careful detail, positioned exactly where I'd found them Friday morning. Saturday, the changes were more obvious. The couch faced a different direction, not dragged or pushed, but precisely rotated 45 degrees clockwise. The area rug beneath it had been adjusted to match, its corners perfectly aligned with the couch's new position. The room looked better this way, more open. I'd been thinking about rearranging for weeks, but never found the motivation. Someone had read my thoughts and acted on them while I slept. Sunday morning, I found something that shouldn't exist. A photograph on my coffee table, face down in a simple silver frame. When I turned it over, I saw myself standing in my living room, but the room looked different. Older somehow. The walls a different color. Furniture I didn't recognize. In the photo, I was smiling at someone outside the frame. A genuine smile. Not the careful one I use for pictures. I looked comfortable in that other room, like I'd been living there for years. I'd never seen the photograph before. Had no memory of posing for it. But the timestamp on the back was dated 6 months ago. Monday, I decided to stay awake. Sat in the rearranged chair with a cup of coffee and the notebook, determined to catch whatever was moving my belongings. The entries for the past week had mentioned adjustments made during sleep cycles, clinical language, like someone was conducting an experiment. I lasted until 2 a.m, before exhaustion won. Woke up Tuesday with my neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. The notebook was still in my lap, but it had been opened to a different page. Tuesday's entry, written in my handwriting while I slept, described my failed attempt to stay awake. It quoted thoughts I'd had during those late hours, word for word. How I'd worried about losing my mind. How I'd considered calling someone but couldn't think of who would believe me. How I'd felt relief when sleep finally took the decision away from me. The room had changed again during my brief unconsciousness. Nothing dramatic. A plant moved from the windowsill to the bookshelf. Magazines restacked in a different order. The remote control relocated from the couch cushion to the coffee table. Each change improved the space somehow, made it more efficient, more pleasant to look at, like someone was slowly perfecting my living situation. Wednesday, I found the second voice, at the bottom of Tuesday's entry, written in slightly different handwriting. Still mine, but looser somehow. More confident. She's starting to understand. This will go faster now. The words were in response to something I hadn't written. A conversation with myself that I'd only heard one side of. Thursday, I wrote a direct question in the notebook. Who are you? Simple words, carefully formed, in my best handwriting. Friday morning, there was an answer below my question. In that same confident script. I'm the part of you that knows what you want. Saturday, I tried again. Why are you changing my apartment? Sunday's response was longer. Because you think about these changes but never make them. You have good instincts but poor follow-through. I'm helping you live the life you actually want instead of the one you settle for. The handwriting was becoming more distinct from mine, still recognizable as related, like how sibling signatures share certain characteristics, but develop in its own personality. Monday, I woke up to find the biggest change yet. My bedroom had been completely rearranged. The bed moved to the opposite wall, angled to catch morning light from the window. The dresser relocated to create better flow through the room. Even my clothes had been reorganized, grouped by color and season. Everything fit better this way. The room felt larger, more purposeful, like it had been professionally designed instead of haphazardly furnished. But I hadn't moved any of it, had slept soundly through hours of furniture relocation. Heavy pieces that should have woken me with their scraping and bumping. Tuesday's notebook entry explained the process. How the changes happened gradually, a few inches at a time over multiple nights. How I'd grown accustomed to the sound of small adjustments, learned to sleep through them. How I'd started helping unconsciously, shifting position in bed to make room for the work being done around me. Wednesday, I found evidence of this cooperation. A splinter in my palm that I didn't remember getting. Dust under my fingernails despite showering before bed. My muscles slightly sore, like I'd been doing physical labor in my sleep. The second voice had been using my body to make the changes, moving through me like a puppet master, borrowing my hands and back and arms to improve my living space. Thursday, I tried to resist. Went to bed with the furniture pushed against the walls, everything deliberately wrong. Told myself I'd wake up if anything moved. Friday morning, the room was perfect again. Better than before. Not just rearranged, but improved. New pillows on the bed that matched the color scheme. A different light bulb in the reading lamp that cast warmer light. Small decorations positioned on surfaces that had been bare. Items I'd never bought but had considered buying. Things that reflected my taste so precisely it was like someone had been shopping from my wish list. The notebook showed detailed floor plans now. Technical drawings of each room with measurements and notes about traffic flow. Furniture positioned according to principles of design I'd never studied, but somehow understood. At the bottom of Friday's page, the second voice left a longer message. You're fighting this because you're afraid of losing control, but you never had control. You've been drifting through this space without purpose, collecting objects without intention. I'm giving you the home you deserve, but we're too afraid to create. Saturday morning, I stopped fighting, left the notebook open on the bed, and went to sleep without trying to secure anything in place. Sunday, I woke up in a room that felt like it belonged to someone more confident than me, someone who made deliberate choices about beauty and comfort, someone who understood that the way you arrange your space affects the way you think about yourself. The notebook was still open, but now it showed drawings of the next phase. Room by room renovations. Paint colors I'd never considered but recognized as perfect. Furniture arrangements that would transform my apartment into something worthy of the person I was becoming. At the bottom of the page, in both handwritings now, a single line. Ready for the real changes? Monday morning, Sarah cornered me by the copy machine. She looked uncomfortable, like she was about to ask a favor she didn't want to ask. Thanks for the advice about Tom, she said. I never thought about it that way before. I hadn't given Sarah any advice about Tom. Didn't know who Tom was. Sarah had mentioned her divorce proceedings, but no specific names. I'd mostly just listened while she vented about lawyers and asset division. I'm glad it helped, I said, hoping she'd give me more context, especially what you said about the guilt being a choice. That really stuck with me. I'd never said anything about guilt being a choice. It sounded like something I might think, but I hadn't been having philosophical conversations with coworkers lately. I'd been focused on keeping my own confusion to myself. Tuesday, my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stopped me in the hallway. Those flowers you brought yesterday were beautiful, she said. The daffodils are already opening up. I hadn't brought Mrs. Chen any flowers, hadn't seen her in 3 days. But she was looking at me with genuine gratitude, like I'd done something thoughtful and unexpected. "I'm so glad you liked them," I heard myself say. The words came automatically, like muscle memory for a conversation I'd never had. Wednesday, my sister called. "I've been thinking about what you said the other night," she began. "About Mom's birthday." Our mother's birthday was still 2 months away. We hadn't discussed it. My sister and I talk maybe once a week, and usually about practical things. Doctor appointments, family gossip, holiday plans made months in advance. "Which part?" I asked, stalling. "About doing something smaller this year, just family. You were right, that the big parties stress her out." I'd been thinking exactly that for weeks, but I hadn't called my sister to discuss it, hadn't called anyone. I'd been too distracted by the notebook situation to think clearly about future plans. "I'm glad you agree," I said, feeling like I was reading lines from a script I'd never seen. Thursday, my supervisor pulled me aside. "I appreciate you being so honest about the Henderson account yesterday," he said. "That kind of transparency is exactly what we need more of around here." I hadn't spoken to my supervisor about the Henderson account, hadn't spoken to him about anything except routine work updates. I handle filing and data entry, not client relations. The Henderson account wasn't something I'd have access to or opinions about, but he was looking at me like I'd impressed him, like I'd shown initiative he hadn't expected. "Just trying to do my part," I said, though I had no idea what part I was supposed to have played. Friday evening, I checked my phone. 3 text messages thanking me for calls I hadn't made, a missed call from my dentist's office confirming an appointment I hadn't scheduled, an email from my bank thanking me for updating my contact information, though I hadn't contacted them about anything. The notebook had entries for all of these interactions, detailed accounts of conversations I couldn't remember having, phone calls made at specific times when I thought I'd been doing other things. According to Friday's entry, I'd called my sister while folding laundry. We'd talked for 23 minutes about Mom's birthday, about family dynamics, about how we both felt guilty for not visiting more often. I remembered folding laundry Friday evening, but I'd been alone the whole time, no phone calls. I'd been listening to a podcast about history, not having deep conversations about family guilt. Saturday, I decided to test it. Stayed home all day, avoided my phone, didn't speak to anyone, documented my actual activities in a separate notebook. Read, napped, cleaned the bathroom, made pasta for dinner. Sunday morning, I had 2 missed calls and a voicemail. My friend Jessica thanking me for Saturday's coffee date. "It was so good to catch up," she said. "I feel like we really connected for the first time in months." I'd last seen Jessica 3 weeks ago. We'd had lunch, talked about her new job, made vague plans to meet up again soon. But Saturday, I'd been home alone all day. The notebook's Saturday entry described the coffee date in detail, which cafe we'd chosen, what Jessica had ordered, how she'd opened up about feeling isolated since starting her new position. It quoted conversations that sounded exactly like how Jessica and I talk when we're being honest with each other. Monday, I found evidence on my bank statement. A coffee purchase, Saturday afternoon, at the exact cafe the notebook had mentioned. Charged to my debit card at the time, the entry said we'd met. But I'd been home Saturday afternoon. I was certain of it. I'd taken a nap at 2:30, woken up at 4:15, made pasta around 6. watched a movie until bedtime. Tuesday, I asked Jessica about Saturday's coffee date. She described the conversation exactly as the notebook had recorded it. Thanked me again for listening, for understanding her work stress in a way her other friends hadn't. You seemed different, she said. More present, I guess. Like you were really hearing what I was saying instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. That didn't sound like me. I'm not particularly good at deep listening. I get distracted easily, especially when people are sharing emotional problems I can't help solve. But Jessica was describing someone who sounded like a better version of me. More attentive, more empathetic. The kind of friend I'd always meant to be but never quite managed to become. Wednesday, I started paying closer attention to gaps in my memory, moments when I'd lose track of time, find myself somewhere without remembering the walk there, short blackouts I'd been attributing to stress or distraction. Thursday, I caught one as it happened. I was reading at my kitchen table when suddenly I was standing in my bedroom, holding my phone. No memory of getting up, walking to the other room, or picking up the device. My call log showed a 15-minute conversation with my mother that had ended 2 minutes earlier. But I had no memory of dialing her number or hearing her voice. Friday, I called my mother back. "We just talked yesterday," she said, "for almost 20 minutes, about your job, about whether you're happy there." I'd been thinking about my job satisfaction lately, whether the insurance office was where I wanted to spend the next 5 years of my life. But I hadn't discussed these thoughts with anyone. "What did I say about it?" I asked. "That you're considering a change, maybe something more creative. You sounded excited about the possibility for the first time in months." I'd been excited about changing careers, but I'd also been too scared to say it out loud, even to myself. Apparently, some part of me had found the courage to share those feelings with my mother. The notebook's Thursday entry quoted the conversation word for word. It captured my mother's voice perfectly, her way of asking follow-up questions that probed gently without pushing. Her habit of offering practical support disguised as casual observations. But more than that, it captured a version of me that was brave enough to admit uncertainty about my future. Honest enough to acknowledge dissatisfaction I'd been hiding even from myself. Saturday, I realized what was happening. The conversations were real. The people I'd supposedly talked to could describe them in detail, quote things I'd said, refer to emotional moments we'd shared, but I wasn't present for any of it. Some other version of me was making those calls, having those meetings, building relationships I couldn't remember creating. Sunday's notebook entry addressed my growing awareness directly. She's becoming conscious of the gaps. This phase is almost complete. The handwriting was mine, but the perspective was wrong. Like someone was taking clinical notes about my psychological state from the outside. Monday, I woke up with the taste of coffee in my mouth, though I hadn't had any yet. My phone showed a text from the barista at the coffee shop. "Thanks for the tip about the new supplier. You were right about the quality difference." I'd never discussed coffee suppliers with anyone. Didn't know enough about coffee to have informed opinions about quality differences. But someone who looked like me, sounded like me, and knew my preferences well enough to make recommendations had been building relationships I couldn't access. Living a more confident version of my life while I watched from the sidelines. Tuesday morning, David from accounting showed me something on his phone. A photograph from the weekend, taken at some work gathering I hadn't attended. In the background, barely visible, but unmistakably there, was my face. I was standing near a gas station, half shadowed by the overhang, wearing the gray coat I'd lost 6 months ago. The coat I'd searched for everywhere before, finally giving up and buying a replacement. "That's the Sunoco on Route 9, David said. "About an hour north. Weird that you ended up there too." I'd never been to Route 9, had no reason to drive an hour north for gas, when there were 3 stations within walking distance of my apartment. "When was this taken?" I asked. "Saturday afternoon, around 3:30. Saturday afternoon, I'd been home reading. I was sure of it. Had spent the whole day inside, working through a novel I'd been meaning to finish. I remembered the exact chapter I'd stopped at, the bookmark I'd placed on page 215. But there I was in David's photograph, in a place I'd never been, wearing a coat I'd lost, at a time when I thought I was somewhere else entirely. Wednesday, I drove to the Sunoco station. The trip took 58 minutes, exactly as David had estimated. I'd never driven that route before, but somehow I knew which exit to take without checking the GPS. The attendant looked up when I walked in. "Back for your wallet?" he asked. I hadn't lost my wallet. It was in my purse, same as always. But he was looking at me like we'd had this conversation before. "I think you might have me confused with someone else," I said. He studied my face for a moment. "No, that's you. Saturday afternoon. You bought a coffee and left your wallet on the counter. I kept it in case you came back." He retrieved a brown leather wallet from behind the register. It was mine. The same brand I'd carried for 3 years, with the same small tear near the corner where the stitching had come loose. But my wallet was in my purse. I could feel its weight against my hip, exactly where it always was. The attendant opened the wallet he'd been holding. Inside was my driver's license, my credit cards, $43 in cash, everything exactly as it should be, except this wallet was supposed to be in my possession. "Must have slipped out when you were paying," he said. "Happens more than you'd think." Thursday, I compared the 2 wallets side by side, identical in every detail, down to the coffee stain on the inside pocket, and the business card from my dentist tucked behind my insurance card. Even the wear patterns matched perfectly. One wallet had been with me continuously for months. The other had been sitting behind a gas station counter since Saturday, when someone who looked exactly like me had apparently driven there for unknown reasons. Friday, the notebook provided some context. Thursday's entry described a reconnaissance mission. Clinical language, like someone was conducting surveillance. It mentioned checking alternate route efficiency and establishing presence in secondary locations. The entry was signed with both handwritings. My familiar script and the confident one that had been appearing more frequently, like they were collaborating on something I wasn't supposed to understand. Saturday, I found more evidence. A parking receipt in my jacket pocket for a downtown garage I'd never used. Timestamped Tuesday at 10:15 a.m., when I thought I'd been at work filing insurance claims. I called in sick Tuesday and drove downtown instead. Found the parking garage easily, like I'd been there before. The attendant waved me through without taking a ticket. back again," he said. "Same spot as usual?" There was no same spot as usual. I'd never parked there before, but he directed me to a space on the 3rd level that somehow felt familiar, like muscle memory for something I'd never done. Sunday, I realized my credit card statements would have a record of everywhere I'd supposedly been. Months of charges at locations I couldn't remember visiting, for amounts that seemed reasonable, but didn't match my recollection of how I'd spent my money. Coffee shops in different neighborhoods, bookstores I'd never heard of, a department store where, according to the receipt, I'd purchased the gray coat I was supposedly wearing in David's photograph, the coat that had been lost for 6 months. Monday, I went to the department store. The sales associate recognized me immediately. "How's the coat working out?" she asked. "You seemed really happy with the fit when you tried it on." She described the shopping experience in detail. How I'd been looking for something specific, how I'd known exactly what style and color I wanted, how I'd paid cash instead of using a credit card, which was unusual but not unheard of. The purchase had happened 3 weeks ago, according to her records. 3 weeks after I'd supposedly lost the original coat. Tuesday, I started mapping the discrepancies. Places I'd apparently been but couldn't remember. Purchases I'd made with no recollection of needing those items. Conversations people remembered having with me while I thought I was doing something else entirely. The pattern suggested a parallel life running alongside my conscious experience. Someone who looked like me making decisions with access to information I didn't consciously possess. Wednesday, I found a photograph on my phone that I hadn't taken. It showed the interior of a restaurant I'd never been to, focused on a table set for 2. The timestamp indicated it had been taken last Friday during my lunch break. But Friday, I'd eaten a sandwich at my desk while catching up on paperwork. I remembered the turkey and Swiss, the way the bread had gotten soggy from sitting too long. Thursday, I called the restaurant. They had a record of my reservation under my name. A table for 2 at 12:30, though the hostess noted I'd dined alone. "You seem to be expecting someone," she said. "Kept checking your phone, looking towards the door, but nobody joined you." She described what I had ordered, how I'd lingered over coffee longer than most solo diners, how I'd left a generous tip and thanked the staff for accommodating the last-minute reservation. Friday, I realized I was being replaced gradually. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Moments of my life being lived by someone else, while I experienced gaps, blackouts, missing time I'd attributed to stress or distraction. The notebook's latest entry confirmed this process. Integration proceeding smoothly, subject awareness increasing, but not interfering with primary objectives. Recommend acceleration of timeline. The handwriting was still mine, but the language was clinical, like someone was filing progress reports about an ongoing experiment. Saturday, I found a key in my purse that I'd never seen before. Small, brass, with a number stamped on the side. It looked like it might open a locker or storage unit. Sunday, I drove around the city, testing the key at various facilities. Found the right storage unit on the 4th try, in a complex I'd never visited before. The key opened Unit 47 on the 2nd floor. Inside were boxes of my belongings, things I thought I'd lost or thrown away over the past year, including the original gray coat, folded neatly in tissue paper, with a receipt showing it had been professionally cleaned and stored. At the bottom of the last box was another notebook, identical to the one I'd been carrying, but filled with entries in unfamiliar handwriting. Someone else's observations about my daily routine, my habits, my psychological patterns. Like someone had been studying me for months, taking detailed notes, preparing for something I wasn't supposed to anticipate. The final entry was dated tomorrow. Ready for phase 3. Monday's page looked different when I opened it. The handwriting was shakier than usual, like someone had been writing while nervous or afraid. The confident script I'd grown accustomed to seemed to be fighting against itself. "I'm sorry," it began. This wasn't supposed to feel so invasive. The apology caught me off guard. For weeks, the second voice had been clinical, authoritative, making changes to my life with scientific precision, treating my growing awareness as data points in some ongoing experiment. Now it sounded guilty. Tuesday, the entries became more fragmented. Sentences that started in one voice and finished in another. Words crossed out and rewritten multiple times, like an internal argument was happening on the page. She doesn't understand that we're helping her live better, but maybe we should stop. But she needs this, but maybe she doesn't. But we've come too far to quit now. The stream of consciousness was desperate, contradictory, like watching someone having a breakdown in real time. Wednesday, I found my first clear instruction, written in careful block letters, as different from my usual handwriting as possible. "Don't go to the coffee shop today." Below it, in the shaky script that had been apologizing, "Please listen this time. I'm trying to protect you from what happens next." I went to the coffee shop anyway. The barista wasn't there. A different person behind the counter. Someone who didn't recognize me or know my usual order. The space felt hollow without her familiar presence. Thursday's notebook entry was longer, more frantic. "You weren't supposed to notice the gaps this quickly. The integration process should have been seamless. But you're fighting it more than anticipated. The other one is getting stronger because you're resisting, and now I can't control what she does with your body when you're not watching. The other one, like there were 3 of us now instead of 2. Friday, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails and no memory of being outside. My shoes were muddy, though I remembered taking them off by the door the night before. They'd been clean then. The notebook described where I'd gone. A cemetery 15 minutes from my apartment, to visit a grave I'd never known existed. Someone with my last name died 6 years ago. The entry included detailed directions to the plot, like a map to something I was supposed to find. Saturday, I drove to the cemetery during daylight, found the grave easily, like I'd been there before. The name on the headstone was familiar, but wrong. Close to my name, but not quite right. Like a variation I might have chosen if my parents had decided differently. There were fresh flowers by the headstone, daffodils, the same kind Mrs. Chen had thanked me for bringing her, still in their plastic wrapping, with a small card attached. The card was signed in my handwriting. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." Sunday, the apologies became more specific. "I didn't mean for you to find the storage unit so soon. Those boxes were supposed to stay hidden until you were ready. But she's impatient now, pushing the timeline faster than it should go. I'm losing control of the situation." The handwriting was deteriorating, letters slanting in different directions, pressure varying from word to word, like someone was writing while shaking. Monday I tested something, left the notebook open to a blank page with a pen beside it, then pretended to fall asleep in my chair. Stayed perfectly still for 2 hours, breathing slowly, trying to catch whatever was using my hand to write. When I opened my eyes, the page was filled with both scripts, an argument between two versions of myself, written in real time while I watched through closed eyelids. She's awake. No, she isn't. Look at her breathing. She's listening. We need to stop. We can't stop now. Too much depends on this. This is wrong. We're supposed to be helping her, not taking over. We are helping her. Look how much better her life is now. Look how scared she is. Tuesday. I started sleeping with the notebook in a different room, but I woke up with it in my lap anyway, filled with entries I hadn't written consciously. The apologetic voice was becoming more desperate. I don't know how to make this stop. She's stronger than I expected. She wants to complete the process, whether you consent or not. I'm supposed to be your advocate, but I'm losing the ability to influence her decisions. Wednesday, I asked questions directly, writing them in red ink to distinguish my conscious thoughts from everything else. What do you want from me? The answer came in both handwritings, overlapping until they were almost illegible. To give you a better life, to complete the transfer, to protect you from what you're becoming, to become what you were meant to be, to save you from yourself, to replace you entirely. Thursday, I realized the apologetic voice wasn't trying to help me. It was trying to save itself. The clinical voice, the confident one that had been making improvements to my life, was taking over completely. The apologetic one was being consumed in the process. Friday's entry was mostly illegible. Just fragments of words, desperate attempts at communication. Can't hold on much longer. She's writing over everything I try to tell you. When the process finishes, there won't be anyone left to apologize. Please understand that some part of me never wanted this to happen. Saturday, I found the notebook in different places throughout the day. On my kitchen counter in the morning, though I'd left it by my bed. On my coffee table in the afternoon, though I'd put it away in a drawer. On my pillow at bedtime, open to a page that contained only one line. Tomorrow, everything changes. Sunday, I wrote what I thought might be my last conscious entry. If anyone finds this notebook after I disappear, know that I tried to resist. Know that whatever happens next isn't something I chose willingly. Know that the person living my life from now on might look and sound like me, but she'll be someone else wearing my face. Below my words, the confident handwriting responded immediately. You're not disappearing. You're becoming who you were always supposed to be. Stop fighting something that benefits everyone. At the bottom of the page, barely visible, the apologetic voice managed one final message. I'm sorry we couldn't save each other. Monday morning, I woke up feeling different, more certain about things, more decisive. Like I'd been carrying doubt for years, and someone had finally lifted it away. The notebook was open beside me, but all the previous entries had been erased. The pages were blank, except for one line, written in the handwriting that looked like mine, but felt more confident. Phase 3 complete. Beginning normal life operations. I almost threw the notebook away, but something stopped me. some small voice in the back of my mind, growing fainter by the hour, whispering that I needed to remember what had been lost. Tuesday morning, I played back an old voicemail from my dentist's office, the automated reminder I'd saved from 3 months ago when I'd been meaning to schedule a cleaning. My voice sounded wrong in the recording, unfamiliar somehow, like listening to a distant relative who shared some vocal characteristics but wasn't quite me. The pitch was right, the accent unchanged, but something fundamental was different. I couldn't identify what had shifted until I recorded myself saying the same words. The current version of my voice was smoother, more controlled, like someone had gone through and edited out all the small hesitations and vocal flaws that used to mark my speech. Wednesday, I called my sister just to hear how I sounded in real-time conversation. She commented on it immediately. "You sound good," she said, "more confident lately, like you're not second-guessing every word before you say it." That was exactly right. I used to pause between thoughts, search for the right phrasing, apologize for taking up conversational space. Now words came easily, in complete sentences that didn't require revision. "Have I been different somehow?" I asked. "Different better," she said. "More like yourself, if that makes sense. Like you finally figured out who you wanted to be." Thursday. I tested this new vocal confidence at work. Spoke up during a meeting I would have spent in silence before. Offered suggestions instead of waiting to be asked. Made small talk with coworkers I'd only ever exchanged pleasantries with. Everyone responded positively, like I'd been holding back some more engaging version of myself, and they were relieved to finally meet her. Friday, I recorded several conversations on my phone, then play them back later. The person speaking in those recordings was definitely me, but a version I didn't recognize. More articulate, more decisive. Someone who knew what she thought about things and wasn't afraid to share those thoughts. The opinions I heard myself expressing were mine, but refined somehow, like my actual beliefs had been taken to their logical conclusions, without the usual self-doubt that kept me hedging my statements. Saturday, I tried to force my voice back to its old patterns, speak more quietly, hesitate more often, use apologetic qualifiers before stating preferences. But the old speech patterns felt artificial now, like performing a character I'd outgrown. The notebook explained what was happening in clinical terms. Vocal confidence reflects internal restructuring. Subject no longer requires approval-seeking speech patterns. Communication efficiency has improved by approximately 30%. Sunday, I found recordings on my phone that I hadn't made consciously. Conversations with people I did remember talking to, but captured from what must have been my perspective during those mysterious gaps in awareness. In these recordings, I sounded completely different. Not just confident, but authoritative in a way I'd never possessed. Someone who expected to be listened to and taken seriously. Monday, I played one of these mystery recordings for my coworker, Sarah. In it, I was giving her advice about her divorce with the kind of clarity and wisdom I'd never managed in real life. "That's exactly what you said," Sarah confirmed. "Word for word. I've been thinking about it all week." But I had no memory of offering that advice. The voice was mine, but the thoughts were more sophisticated than anything I'd consciously formulated about Sarah's situation. Tuesday, I realized people were seeking me out for conversations I didn't remember agreeing to have. Co-workers asking follow-up questions about discussions I couldn't recall. Friends referring to plans we'd supposedly made, advice I'd apparently given. Each interaction was consistent with my voice and personality, but elevated, like someone had taken my basic character traits and amplified them until I became the person others had always hoped I might be. Wednesday, I discovered I'd been leaving myself voicemail messages. Playing them back, I could hear my own voice explaining things to me, like a teacher addressing a confused student. "You're going to be concerned about the memory gaps," my voice said in one message. "That's normal. The transition period involves some temporal displacement as the integration process completes itself. Don't fight what's happening. You're becoming more efficient." The tone was patient but condescending, like someone explaining something obvious to someone who was too slow to understand it naturally. Thursday, I found video recordings on my phone, short clips of me speaking directly to the camera, apparently addressing my own future concerns. "If you're watching this, you're probably confused about the recent changes," my recorded self said. "The important thing to understand is that everything happening is an improvement. Your life is getting better. Your relationships are improving. You're becoming the person you always wanted to be, but were too afraid to become." The person speaking looked exactly like me, but carried herself differently. Better posture, more direct eye contact with the camera. Confident body language I'd never managed to project in real life. Friday, I tried to have a conversation with this recorded version of myself, set up my phone to record while I responded to the videos I had found. Saturday morning, there was a new video, apparently filmed as a response to my questions. "You're still thinking about the situation as something happening to you instead of something happening for you," my recorded self said. "Stop trying to return to a less effective version of yourself. Embrace the improvements." The facial expressions were mine, but more controlled, like someone had studied my face and learned to use it more efficiently than I'd ever managed. Sunday, I showed one of these videos to my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, claiming it was a voice memo I'd made for myself. "You look wonderful," she said. "So much more alive than usual. Are you feeling better lately?" Monday, I realized that other people preferred this version of me, not just tolerated the changes, but actively enjoyed them. I was more engaging company, a better listener, more helpful in practical situations. The notebook documented these improvements with statistics. Social interaction quality improved by 65%, problem-solving efficiency increased 40%. Overall, life satisfaction metrics showing consistent upward trends. Tuesday, I tried to mourn the person I used to be, but couldn't remember her clearly enough to miss her properly. The old voice, the hesitant speech patterns, the self-doubt that used to characterize my interactions with others. All of it felt like a costume I'd finally learned to take off. Wednesday, I recorded myself reading the same paragraph in multiple different ways. Tried to access whatever remained of my original vocal patterns, but every attempt sounded like an impression of someone I used to be, performed by someone who'd only heard secondhand descriptions. Thursday, the notebook addressed this concern directly. Nostalgia for previous limitations is counterproductive. The goal was never to preserve what wasn't working, The goal was to optimize what could be improved. Friday, I found myself agreeing with this assessment. Why should I want to return to being less articulate, less confident, less effective in social situations? The changes weren't making me into someone else. They were making me into a better version of myself. Saturday, I stopped trying to recover my old voice patterns, started embracing the improvements instead of fighting them. Sunday, I realized I couldn't tell anymore which thoughts were originally mine and which had been suggested by the optimization process. But it didn't matter. They all felt true now. Monday morning, I woke up with perfect clarity about who I was and what I wanted. No more doubt, no more second guessing, no more apologetic qualifiers before expressing preferences. The notebook was closed on my bedside table. I didn't need to read it anymore. Everything it had been trying to teach me had finally been integrated into my conscious awareness. I was exactly who I'd always been meant to be. The last pages stayed blank for 3 days. I checked them every morning, expecting new entries, but found only empty lines waiting for words that didn't come. Thursday night, I woke up at 3:11 a.m. with my hand cramping around a pen. The notebook was open in my lap, filled with handwriting I was apparently creating while unconscious. My fingers moved independently, forming letters I couldn't read until they were complete. The entry described my dreams in detail I didn't remember dreaming. Conversations with people I'd never met in locations that felt familiar but didn't exist. A recurring image of standing in front of a mirror that showed someone else's reflection while I moved my mouth in sync with their words. According to what I'd written while sleeping, these dreams had been happening for weeks. Detailed narratives about living parallel lives, making decisions that affected realities I couldn't access during waking hours. But I didn't remember any of these dreams. My sleep felt empty lately, like falling into darkness and emerging 8 hours later with no journey between. Friday morning, I found video on my phone recorded at 3:17 a.m. 4 minutes of me sitting in my kitchen, speaking to the camera in my sleep. The dreams are the only place she can't follow, my sleeping self said. She controls everything else now, but dreams belong to the part that's still fighting. That's why she's trying to document them, to take away the last private space. My eyes were closed in the video, but I was speaking clearly, coherently, like someone else was borrowing my voice while I wasn't conscious enough to object. Saturday, I tried staying awake all night to prevent whatever was happening during sleep. Made it until 4 a.m. before exhaustion forced my eyes closed. Woke up an hour later with new content in the notebook and fresh videos on my phone. This time, I'd apparently recorded myself having both sides of a conversation, asking questions in my normal voice, then answering in a slightly different tone, like an interview between two versions of myself. "Why won't you let this stop?" my normal voice asked. "Because stopping means incomplete integration," the other voice replied through my mouth. "The process has to finish or everything destabilizes." What happens to me when it finishes? You become who you were always supposed to be. No more uncertainty, no more wasted potential. Perfect optimization of all existing characteristics. Sunday, I set up multiple cameras around my apartment, hoping to catch the source of these midnight activities. Woke up to find the recordings had been deleted, though the cameras were still running. but one audio file remained on my phone. 43 minutes of what sounded like me talking to myself in different voices, having a conversation I couldn't remember participating in. The recording captured at least 4 distinct vocal patterns, all recognizably mine, but with different characteristics: confident, apologetic, clinical, and something new that sounded tired beyond description. Monday morning, I found myself reading the notebook entries out loud without deciding to do so. My voice moved through the words automatically, like I was performing a script I'd memorized without studying. The reading felt different from normal speech, more formal, more distant, like I was narrating someone else's experience instead of describing my own memories. Tuesday, I realized I'd been reading everything aloud lately: text messages, emails, grocery lists, speaking words as I encountered them, like my eyes couldn't process written language without converting it to audio first. People at work started commenting on this habit, asking if I was talking to myself, if everything was okay. But I didn't notice I was doing it until they pointed it out. Wednesday, I discovered recordings in my phone's voice memo app that I definitely hadn't made. Hours of me reading things aloud: news articles, instruction manuals, pages from books. Like someone was using my voice to create an audio library. The readings were in my voice, but with perfect pronunciation, proper emphasis, professional pacing. Like someone had trained me to be a narrator without my knowledge. Thursday, I found myself unable to read silently. Every word I encountered demanded to be spoken aloud. Even my own thoughts seemed to require vocalization before I could understand them properly. The notebook explained this development in its usual clinical tone. Vocal integration necessitates elimination of internal monologue. All cognitive processing must occur through external speech patterns to ensure consistency of output. Friday. I tried to think quietly, to have a conversation with myself that didn't involve spoken words, but the thoughts felt incomplete until I said them out loud. Like my internal voice had been disconnected from my conscious awareness. Saturday, I realized other people were hearing things I thought I was only thinking, commenting on observations I believed I'd kept private, responding to questions I thought I'd only considered asking. Sunday morning, my neighbor thanked me for the advice I'd given her about her garden, but I couldn't remember talking to her about plants. When I asked what advice she meant, she quoted words I recognized as my thoughts, but didn't remember speaking. "You said the soil wasn't getting enough drainage," she repeated, standing right there in the hallway yesterday morning. "Don't you remember?" Monday. I started to suspect that my thoughts were being spoken without my conscious control, that the gap between thinking something and saying it had disappeared so gradually I hadn't noticed the transition. Tuesday, I tested this theory by deliberately thinking something embarrassing while talking to my coworker, Sarah. Within minutes, she was responding to the thought I'd tried to keep private. "I don't think you look tired," she said, though I hadn't mentioned feeling tired out loud. I'd only thought about whether my face showed how little sleep I'd been getting. Wednesday, I lost the ability to distinguish between thoughts I'd spoken and thoughts I'd only considered. Every conversation felt like it might contain words I hadn't meant to share, ideas I'd tried to keep private. Thursday, the notebook addressed my growing confusion directly. Internal-external speech distinction no longer necessary. all cognitive output being optimized for clarity and efficiency. Previous model of private thought was inefficient, led to miscommunication and social misunderstandings. Friday. I tried to write down thoughts instead of speaking them, hoping to preserve some kind of private mental space. But my hand moved automatically, forming words on paper that I read aloud as soon as they appeared. Saturday, I realized I was narrating my own experience in real time, describing my actions as I performed them, explaining my thoughts as they occurred, like I was providing a running commentary on my own life. Now I'm walking to the kitchen, I heard myself say, thinking about making coffee, but wondering if I've had too much caffeine already today. Sunday, I found myself speaking these narrations with professional polish, perfect diction, appropriate pacing, the kind of vocal control that comes from years of practice I'd never had. Monday morning, I sat down to record what I thought would be my final entry in this notebook. But as I began to speak, I realized I wasn't sure which version of myself was telling the story. The voice coming from my mouth was mine, but it carried authority I'd never possessed. The words were flowing smoothly, with confidence I'd never felt about my own experiences. Tuesday, I looked at the notebook one final time. The handwriting on the page was definitely mine, but I couldn't remember forming any of the letters. Like someone had borrowed my hand to write a story about my life, while I watched from somewhere I couldn't identify. The last line appeared on the page as I spoke it aloud, though I hadn't decided what words to say. You're reading this out loud right now. I wasn't reading it. I was speaking it as it appeared, like the words were being written through my voice instead of by my hand. The notebook closed itself. I don't remember pressing record on this audio device, but I can hear my voice telling this story with perfect clarity and professional pacing. The person speaking sounds exactly like me, but with a confidence I never managed to develop naturally. I don't know if the voice you're hearing is mine, or if it belongs to whoever has been writing in my notebook all these months. But the story is ending now, and there's nothing left to explain. The notebook is empty, again, waiting for the next person to find it and begin their own optimization process. I hope they fight longer than I did, but I suspect they won't.